Oftentimes when we think about a story, there's the person telling the story, and then there's the listeners or the people taking in the story. But I actually think to be a story in its most essential self is that before someone begins to tell a story, they've actually done some listening before that. Because an effective story takes into account what concerns a viewer might have, a listener might have, what hopes they might have. The only way to really understand what that looks like is to listen.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast on the EdUp Experience Podcast Network. This is a show dedicated to helping higher ed marketers tell better stories, create better content, and enroll more students. My name's John Azzoni. I'm the founder at Unveiled, and we're a video production company working specifically with college marketing teams to make it easy for them to scale up and even automate their student and alumni success stories through our subscription approach. And you can learn more about that at unveiled.tv, and that's UNVEILD.tv. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, go ahead and subscribe. We'd love to have you. And if you're wanting your college or university's content to resonate on a deeper emotional level with prospective students, with alumni, with parents, whatever, I want you to subscribe to my free newsletter. Every week I send out tips and insights on creating more emotionally resonant content, including examples and best practices from other institutions, articles and blog posts, that week's podcast episode, and much more. So head over to unveiled.tv/newsletter and sign up. All right, let's get on with the show. My guest today is Sarah Whorton. Sarah is the Senior Strategic Communication Consultant at University of Missouri System and manager of the media production team. And she's got, we chatted a couple months ago about just storytelling, just kind of talking shop. And she mentioned this four-point approach to storytelling that she has. And I thought it was really intriguing. And so we invited her on to talk about that today. So that's what we're going to talk about. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So your background's screenwriting, right?
Correct. My background's in film and video. And then as I've wandered through my career, screenwriting became more important. And so exploring that while also being employed in the higher education space has been an interesting alignment of those things and how it affects my work and how I tell stories. So I didn't initially think it would have that alignment, but as everything with art, it always finds its way to where we're at. Yeah.
Cool. So tell me something, on a personal level, what's something that people would be surprised to know about you?
I think most people would be surprised that I was big in theater as a high schooler and almost went in and got a degree in theater and was committed hardcore. I think most people who know me would describe me as quite the introvert. So, and theater we tend to think of the most extroverted individuals as being that. I have not stepped on a stage in a long time. So, but it's still there. That passion is still there, that terrifying moment before you step on stage and you have to just force yourself to do it. That comes in handy a lot in work and life.
Yeah. I identify with that. I'm such an introvert and yet if it's some sort of performance, I can get up there and be a totally different person. And it's so weird. If it's a public speaking kind of thing, or even on this podcast, I was over at my dad's the other day. And he's like, I listened to one of your podcast episodes. He's like, I've never heard you talk that much.
Okay.
I was like, I know it's different. It's different when I'm asking the questions, but if I'm at a party or something, if I meet you at a networking event, you're going to walk away being like, that guy is super awkward.
Yes. But there's something about that adrenaline rush where you can't go back. You only can go through it, that it's puts those survival instincts on high alert and you're just I'm going through it.
It's almost like you're playing a character of your, a different character that's not yourself, in
Correct.
real life.
Right. It's all those insecurities, doubts, fears, they get pushed to the side fast because they have no place when you're in it and needing to say something or present yourself. So it is.
Yeah.
It's sort of addictive too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That like adrenaline rush.
Like
Yes.
I wish I had the talent to be a stand-up comedian, because I follow a lot of comedians, and I just imagine that, like, if you just know your routine really well, if you know your set and you know where you're going to get the laughs, that's got to be like the like
Yes.
cocaine. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you're just delivering it, and you just got
Yes.
the crowd just like putty in your hands, you know.
Yes. Yes. But I feel like the only way they get there is there were times that were like horrific on stage where no one
Oh, for
laughed
sure.
or there was like a heckler or something.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way they know that how the structure, how the story should land, where the laugh should come.
Yeah,
So, but yeah, it's got to feel good after all those trials to come out and just nail it and have the audience in it. Has to be
for
highlight
sure.
of things. Yeah, agreed.
So tell us about your journey to, well, you told us a little bit, but tell us about your journey
Mm,
to screenwriting and higher ed specifically.
sure. So
Or
I,
screenwriting and video production, I should say. Let me include that part.
sure. Sure. So I graduated from my undergrad with a degree in digital filmmaking, which is basically video, but it was a little more fiction based as far as storytelling. But the technical side was very video, digital heavy. After that, I did a lot of freelance work, touched reality television for a little bit, decided that I would like something a little more stable. I live in Missouri, so Mizzou, or the University of Missouri, was needing video people. So I thought, oh, I'll just do that for a little bit. I've been there coming up on 12 years, so obviously that wasn't a small stop in that.
Yeah.
And but I still loved doing that creative fiction side, telling stories in a different way. So I decided to pursue an MFA in screenwriting and television writing. Um, yeah, that's just sort of, even though what I do for work is storytelling, it's nice to be able to take pieces from each kind of storytelling. They have slightly different lenses that they look through.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's sort of how I found, and yet again, I'm still in higher ed, which surprises me every
Yeah.
day that I'm still here.
I love those kind of stories when people like stumble into a job that they thought was just temporary, and then they're just
Yes,
there for years and years and
yes,
years.
yes, and part of it is like the people. I mean, I think sometimes that's why I got into video and film, is that you get to encounter people who have very different life experiences, who oftentimes have, the reason you're interviewing them is because they've had a success or a milestone hit. And I just find people very fascinating. I love listening to their stories. I love learning from them. What other job do you get to meet so a variety of people, this diversity of people and experiences? Um,
Hmm.
it just, yeah. So I think that's it made me stay for sure.
What kind of school is University of Missouri system? Like, what is it, like a, is it large? Is it smaller? Tell me about it.
Sure. So the University of Missouri system is a system of universities, public education universities, in the state of Missouri. There's four different universities within the system. The largest is the University of Missouri, Mizzou. You've seen them from the Cotton Bowl, and that definitely, those big public institution. Um, Oftentimes the majority of students are those like typical undergrad students on campus experience. And then there is UMKC, which is in Kansas City. It certainly appeals to that undergrad population. Has a sports team. I almost said, like basketball has sports at basketball, and a variety of other things. So it has some traditional elements of that undergrad typical higher education experience, but most students don't live on campus. So it is still a bit of a commuter campus. The University of St. Louis, Missouri St. Louis, is in St. Louis, and it's definitely a commuter campus, more non-traditional. offering night classes, things of that sort. Very rare to find a full-time student. I mean, that's a big generalization. I should say that. That's the asterisk. Um, but there are students that are there full-time. There are students that I think live on campus, but mostly it's more of a commuter campus offering that flexibility for a variety of students. And then University of Science and Technology is in Rolla, Missouri, and it has more of a focus in those engineering, science-based degree programs and areas of study. So there tends to be a large on campus, even some graduate students who live on campus. They also have robots that will deliver food on campus. So when you go on
Cool.
campus, it really is like a very different place than other places within the system.
That's cool. We have a sushi place by our house, which is so fun to go to. It's like a conveyor belt style. And so you sit down and there's like a conveyor belt that goes by. You can just pick out whatever sushi you
Yes.
want. And then this little robot comes and brings you your pop and stuff like that. And
Okay.
so it's like just out of this world. It's like so funny to you feel like you're in the future.
Yes, yes. My colleague and I were in Rolla this December interviewing some graduates, and the best thing was like we definitely felt like we were coming to like such a different world because every time we'd look out, we'd be like, "There's a robot, follow it. Uh-oh, it's getting stuck. No, don't get stuck. Go, keep going. Oh, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. It got out. It's fine."
Yeah.
So we definitely look like newbies versus the others that were just like, this is every day for us.
Yes, normal. I
Yes,
didn't
you
okay,
were
so
visitors.
that makes sense because I was gonna ask what's the system part of it. So it's you guys are kind of like the umbrella organization over top of these schools. And
Yeah,
does the marketing, is it centralized through you guys in the system level, or is it like or do they all have decentralized marketing departments?
that's a very complicated answer, John. As I'm sure most people in higher education would understand, is that the answer is yes, all of the above and more. Each campus certainly has its centralized marketing department. Sometimes even departments within individual schools and colleges will have dedicated marketing individuals. I work for a unit called Missouri Online. We promote solely the online degrees and certificate offerings throughout the system. So our focus is specific to online education, and we work to promote all of the different offerings throughout the system. So we'll work with all of the universities within the system. So
Okay.
and
Yes, and
yes, and
um okay, cool. Got it. All right. We've got the intro work out of the way here. What's Let me jump down my question list, go out of order here. Tell me
sure.
what is, because I like what I liked about you coming on this show was the actual like formal screenwriting master's degree
Mhm.
kind of thing, because I think that like um there's this video floating around. There's like so many swear words in it, but it's this guy who is like I don't know, Swedish or something like that, and they're interviewing him, and I don't know what he does, but he's like talking about how like people say they're a storyteller all the time and like how they're not. He's like I saw a guy that builds roller coasters, like he designs roller coasters, and he's like I'm a storyteller. He's like no the f you're not, like he's like you make roller coasters like and that's cool, but like what's the story? It goes up and down and twists around. Like he's like that's a bullshit story. He's like people that write movies and novels and stuff, like those are storytellers. And so I have I think I have a broader view of like storytelling, because I think there is a lot of room for like storytelling in the marketing context is really a lot broader. It's kind of like these like multiple anecdotes, multiple touch points that together help craft a narrative about your school, sort of.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's why I wanted to have you on, was like uh, you're a real screenwriter. You know, yeah.
Certified fresh screenwriter. Yes.
So tell me, in your view, what is a story?
This is a good question that I thought, here's really my point. This is not certified by anyone else. This is just really my point of view. But I really think that a good story starts before the person tells their story. And that key is listening. So oftentimes when we think about a story, there's the person telling the story, and then there's the listeners or the viewers or the people taking in the story. But I actually think to be a story in its most like essential self is that before someone begins to tell a story, they've actually done some listening before that. Because an effective story takes into account what concerns a viewer might have, a listener might have, what hopes they might have. I mean, when we think about like people sitting around the campfire, one of the reasons it's so compelling is that it's speaking to what they're facing, that they're seeing like, here's some concerns I have. Sometimes, like, if we're really talking about like a caveman, it's like, I don't want to get eaten today by,
Yeah.
or like mauled by a bison. And the hopes is that I can like build this beautiful family or, you know, provide for other generations. So an effective story to me requires listening, requires really understanding. But oftentimes we make assumptions about what someone's fears are or concerns or their hopes. But the only way to have the facts, the only way to really understand what that looks like is to listen before speaking. And if that didn't happen, is it perhaps it's more relaying information? And it can
Mm-hmm.
still be a good story. It can be like, that's a great story. I enjoyed it. But to really have a profound effect on the listener, the viewer, the audience, is to really drill down into like that essential human core of like, here's what I'm afraid of. Here's what I'm scared of. Here's what things could look like if I remain hopeful. Or
Hmm.
here's what it could look like if I face this thing I'm afraid of. There could be something really wonderful on the other side of it, or something very human on the other side of it. So to me, that's like my Sarah's definition of what a story is.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. So listening and really like sort of crafting the narrative for the audience that you are speaking to,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Seeing story as a conduit
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm just going to tell my point of view. That
Right.
sometimes can be useful in certain scenarios, um, but oftentimes stories can be a conduit for connection. So, really leaning into that and understanding that it's coming from someplace to be delivered to someplace, and that those are two very essential parts of an effective story.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what I love about storytelling is that conduit for connection. And
Yeah.
the example that always comes to my mind is like when I was a kid and my parents used to take us to church and I didn't want to go and all this stuff. And but like, I went to one of these mega churches where they have like, back then they would talk about like the latest Tom Cruise movie coming out and somehow connect it to Jesus. But
Yeah.
but like when the pastor or they would have a guest speaker or something would start telling a story, I was just like zeroed in,
Mm-hmm.
and like it was usually something funny about their kids or marriage or something, and I was like 14. I'm like but it's even then I'm like, that's hilarious. And like it was just, yeah, just as soon as someone starts telling a story, I feel like your brain does something,
Mm-hmm.
where you want to be just floating down this river of narrative, and you want to see how this is going to resolve, and then
Yes.
you're like primed for the information that's going to come. So I love that.
Yes. Absolutely.
Quick break here. I have a question for you. Have you ever had to manage the production of a video before for your school, where you were the person that had to coordinate all the scheduling. Like you had like 5 people that needed to be interviewed for this thing, and you had to juggle all the schedules and figure out how to line them up for individual slots miraculously on the same day. And on top of that, you had to talk to like your facilities guy and make sure the door to the engineering lab was going to be open at a certain time so the crew could get in there and film some B-roll. You had to coordinate volunteers to be in the footage and blah, 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 and, right? Let me tell you something. Working with an outside video vendor should not look like this. Unfortunately, I've worked with enough video folks to know that the mainstream school of thought is they will coordinate the crew and all the production stuff, the editing, etc., and they will expect you to coordinate all your folks. And I'll be honest, sometimes there's stuff that the video people just can't coordinate for you. Like, I'm probably not going to email your college's president out of the blue to ask them to be in this video and to coordinate their schedule when they've never heard of me or this project. Like, that just makes more sense coming from you, at least to get their initial buy-in. But as much as possible, your job should be to get buy-in from all the right people and then introduce those stakeholders to the video producer to coordinate, which is not you. Unfortunately, we live in a world where it just doesn't work like that most of the time. In fact, I talked to a marketing director at a pretty well-known art school recently who told me he hired this video crew to film a couple program promo videos, and they paid a lot of extra money. This was a bit of a splurge, is the impression I got. And they got 2 videos out of the deal. And he said to me, all that money we paid and I still had to coordinate everything. Like, we paid a premium for someone to do these videos and I was doing all the grunt work. So here's the deal. At Unveiled, one of the things we take really seriously is making sure the process is easy on you, especially that pre-production process, which is where a lot of the not fun stuff tends to show up. So whether we're working together through our video storytelling subscriptions, a big commercial, or maybe a smaller one-off video project, know that in addition to delivering a great end product, we also have our eyes on making that a smooth and oftentimes fun journey along the way. And even after it's done, we want to make sure you're set up for success, which is why we give you all the raw footage, all that B-roll and interview footage to repurpose however you want at no extra charge. So if you have video needs right now, don't let the management of those projects stress you out. We are your partners in taking as much work off your plate as possible. So if that's you, I want you to head over to unveiled.tv. That's unveiled.tv and book a call with me. And let's talk about how we can best support you. All right, back to the show. So what is a pattern that you see too much of in higher ed storytelling?
I will put a caveat that I don't think this is wrong. It's just a pattern that I see often is that oftentimes higher education is saying like, here is a problem or here's a situation in which a potential student might have. The solution to that is our education or our degree or our offering, and sort of leave it at that. Be like, here's your problem, here's your solution, bundled up, perfect. It's going to be so easy when you get in there, no problems. And sort of neglect that the fact that, particularly in higher education, to graduate is, or to even pass a class is to earn a grade, is to earn a degree. The way you earn something is by doing a lot of hard work and by really committing to that. And that's really difficult, particularly if you're in a place as a non-traditional student in which you have a full-time job or some other responsibilities outside of these classes you're taking. It's a really difficult thing. And oftentimes that feels a bit scary to touch on. It feels a bit scary to say it will be hard. But our audience already knows that education is hard. Like, they already know that. So when we don't say it, it becomes almost superficial in a way. It becomes definitely much more of a selling point versus an opportunity to authentically connect to that listener or viewer. Because it looks beautiful and glossy when we're like, I want to advance in my career. I took this degree, graduated, and now I'm the CEO of my business. And everyone's like, that is a valid career path. That is an understandable career path. Of course, we want to promote those stories. That's important. But it's also okay for that person to say, really struggled in this class. There was a semester I took off because of some family issues, or I really wasn't sure if I could get through it. Because by bringing up the trials, the difficulties, the struggles, gives an opportunity for that institution to respond with the other ways that they support their students. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, what sets any experiences apart, is that it's the people, it's the resources available. It's someone saying, I see that you were struggling in this class. Here's some additional materials. Here's a tutor. Here's a study group. Here's a discussion board. Those are all wonderful things that can help any sort of student's journey be much more effective. And then to speak to that is incredible. It's profound. It's takes it beyond just a selling point into the profound experience that higher education can often have, because students find out so much about themselves through the process of going through something difficult. Striving for something difficult brings out sometimes fears, doubts, concerns, like, is this the right path? Am I okay to do this? Can I do this with all these other things? So to say that those are really valid concerns, and to then speak to how that university degree program responded to those with resources, with connection, with other students, faculty, staff, I think is an opportunity to push it beyond a selling point into something that can really speak to an audience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. And there's a study that I read about a few years ago that was something like, and I won't even like try to say what how they did the study. I forget, because I forget what it was, but it was something correlated to like when people experience pain, they are more emotionally connected to the mission or to the brand. Like when like people that go through conflict together have a deeper bond than people that have just gone through positive stuff together. And I think that's like, I mean, we could see that on, in the military, and I mean, it's stuff like that, where when you've gone through something together, that bond is so much stronger. And yeah, and it's not like, just, obviously you're not going to be like, I wanted to do this thing, and so I went to this school and nobody helped me, and it was,
Yes, that's a terrible story. That's a
yeah,
terrible,
that's not one
yeah,
that you want to do, but
right. Yes. I would hope no one would volunteer if that was their experience, because although maybe they're like, I need to tell you, it was awful. You should
yeah,
fix these things. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that we don't give enough credit to how much people resonate with the idea of failure.
Yes.
um
Yes.
I posted a poll a few weeks ago, asking people like, uh I forget what it was, but it was like, would you be comfortable share? Should we normalize failure? Would you be comfortable sharing a story about failure, or is that something that should be kept private? And overwhelmingly, it was like 100% yes, failure. And then I started getting all these stories, in my inbox of people there, because I was like, I want to hear your biggest marketing fail, and I've like got some really good ones. And I just think that is, that's not something that a school would want to do. Like, let's make a whole campaign on about this other failed campaign.
Right.
But it's just the idea of, people connect with struggle,
Yes.
and failure is so much more relatable than, um than success. And, yeah, so it's definitely something to focus on, I think, in your storytelling.
Yes. And like for me personally, my motto to myself is frustration is not failure. As a perfectionist, if I get into do something new and it doesn't magically happen, which it never does, by the way,
Never does.
that is right. That is not my skill set, is to like approach something in a like perfect manner. But I like to hold myself to those standards. So sometimes when I get frustrated at trying something new, I think like, oh, well, this just isn't for me. Like other
Hmm.
people are doing it. They're not frustrated because it's for them. It's not for me. So I'm trying to even coach myself to be like, frustration isn't failure. That's just part of the growth process. That's just part
Hmm.
of trying new things. It's okay to be frustrated. keep going because it's not the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one pain point that you can get through. So yes, I agree. I think, and sometimes this is where I think there's a slight disconnect between higher education and other sort of marketing for other brands, is that I think they're much more comfortable saying, here is a pain point, or here's a frustration, or something where there was a disconnect, and here's how we responded to it. Where higher ed does tend to, we want the glossy stories where
Mm-hmm.
everything went well, and we like the candidates that look exactly like we think they should look, who have the stories we like. And if they have these other things, let's not mention them because like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a downer. Let's just keep it up and up, light, light, light. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that can create a very sterile environment and not be very effective to the viewers that are already used to brands saying, here's some of the things that didn't go well, or here's how we pivoted, or here's some things we're trying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's those stories that can lead to the information that you want to say. So
Yes. Yes.
it's like if you want to say that you have small class sizes and close student professor relationships, tell a story about a student that got into your school and was really struggling and like almost dropped out or something like that, but this one professor, you know, really worked with them and encouraged them in some way or whatever. I mean, that's a way that is conflict that uplifts your brand
Yes.
versus, you know, conflict that's
Yes.
just like telling on yourself. Because we all know
Correct. Yep.
there's so much stuff underneath the surface that's not going right at your school. We don't
Yes.
necessarily need to talk about that stuff, but like finding the pain points in your subject's life, in their story, and not just here's all the reasons why everything went perfect.
Yes.
You know, so cool. Do you feel like storytelling is an overused word in a marketing context?
I don't think it's overused. I think the reason storytelling comes up so often is because it is such an essential part of our lives, that I think that's why that man building roller coasters felt like he was telling stories, because it is such an integrated part of how we connect with others, how we connect with ourselves, how we, even dinner time with the family after a hard day's work, like that's storytelling. So it's such an essential part of our lives that it's natural that it would seep into other
Mm-hmm.
parts of our society, including from a marketing context. I sometimes think there is a division between storytelling versus information sharing, and one of them is more about communicating and a dialogue versus I'm just gonna I should have just released a press release.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what there wasn't. There was just one perspective, and that I think is just a press release,
Yeah.
which is fair. There's a valid reason for those. They have their time and place, but I think those are slightly different from essential, authentic storytelling.
Right. And I think where it gets a little muddled is because I think we equate anything that has like any sort of deeper meaning. Like if we
Mm,
want to, you know, if a chef wants to make a dish but it has a story, like there's a story behind it, or they want you
mm,
to kind of feel something, we'll say, you know, it's easiest to say like this dish tells a story.
mm,
um and maybe more accurately, if you were to nitpick that, the dish isn't telling the story, it's pointing to a story.
mm. Yeah.
But I think that's kind of how we use that word a lot. Storytelling is just like, because there's not really a greater way to um there's not really a great way to communicate like something that you're trying to say, but you're saying it in a more in a less status quo kind of way, like in a
Hmm.
more trying to be a more emotionally impactful.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
that's
okay,
fair.
let's talk about storytelling structure. So you
Hmm.
have this 4 points
Yeah.
approach. So let's just jump into that. What's point number? Well, what are the 4 points, and then we can maybe go into them individually.
Sure. So this is what I call the secret sauce of storytelling. And this is like one of my love languages. Like I love this. And what we've talked about before is structure. That's really what sets apart um, maybe a tool that's pointing to a story versus something that's essentially its story. And basically, what I did was take the longer screenwriting structure, which has a lot of nuances, and then just pared it down to this 4 point structure that can be applied to higher education. And it's exactly a lot of the things we've already talked about. So, number one is acknowledging the need in the person's and the participant's life. So, that is like, here's the reason I've come to this block in the road, or I've come to this choice in the road. Sometimes these come across in I want statements, like I want a career that's flexible. I want a career that allows me more time with my family. So acknowledging the need in the participant's life. This is happens quite a lot in higher education. So it's an essential, quick, here's what is the need. And the second one is the solution. Again, things that we've talked about before. And in higher education marketing, it's like, you need this, here's the solution. It's our degree, it's our program, it's our school. And the third point, which is what we've already talked about, which is acknowledging those struggles. And this is, again, where higher education marketing often stops because that is scary. That feels like dangerous territory to admit that a student enrolled in a program or a degree would struggle, would have these difficult periods. And then the fourth is the response, exactly what we've talked about, which is those triumphs, that success. How did that struggle lead to that success? And oftentimes, the stronger the struggle, the more impactful the triumph or the success. Yep. Again, I think this is partly because exactly what we've talked about already is that it's an essential part of the human experience, is to struggle through something and come out on the other side. Mm-hmm. I also think that oftentimes when we struggle with something, an external struggle, like this textbook is dense, or this professor likes materials in a certain way and I just haven't quite figured that out. Oftentimes these external struggles reveal the internal growth that's happening. So sometimes when we have these external situations, it's really about facing our fears, our doubts, our concerns that we're not up to the task, our concern that maybe this isn't, like maybe we're not going to get the success this time. And then how did that person push through that? Because that's like where the beauty is. That's the exceptional part of being a human, is you hear about someone who's like, I have these fears, you have these fears. These are really legitimate, and I could have been swallowed up by them, but I pushed through it. And that, I think, is something that feels triumphant for that person. But as you're listening as a viewer, it's like, I've had those doubts too. Look at what this person did. They didn't let them stop. Maybe that gives me a little bit of boost to persevere through the thing that I'm encountering in my life. So I think that it's quick 4 points, very things that we've already talked about, things that are very much within our human experience, but higher education can get scared whenever we talk about struggles or trials or pain points.
Yeah, that's a great structure to for schools to really have in their back pockets, like need or like problem, solution, but don't stop there. Like there's what else happened that wasn't completely rosy, and then what was the end result of that. And I think if you don't give people a chance to wonder how things are going to end up, the story is just not very sticky. If you if you ever read a book that just kind of like makes its point in the introduction and then just sort of like continues to reiterate the same, like this book could have been like 3 pages and but you had to make it 200 to like get a publishing deal.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
uh, so yeah, like giving people, but like setting up a question where like you're not sure how that's going to resolve, like how
Yes.
don't like, it's sort of like, okay, problem solution, but not so fast because there's more coming, stick around, you know,
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, one of the ways to do that is to establish those stakes. Like when establishing the need of what that person has, that participant, setting up some stakes of like what happens if they don't get that thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be like, I really need this because, we're adding to our family, or I really need this job because I need to move because a parent is ailing, or whatever it is. If we set up stakes, then it's like when we hear about something that's not going well, all of a sudden you're right. It's that hook to be like, I'm rooting for this person.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to get what they need? I'm in it, and I want to see and how. How did this institution respond to that? If I'm in a similar situation, how are they going to respond to me? So part of it. Oh, I just made. Do you see fireworks?
The fireworks, yeah.
Okay.
My previous guest last week, it kept for no reason. I wasn't doing thumbs down or anything, but it just kept doing like a thumbs down uh emoji. I'm like, and like she's saying something really great, and I'm just like thumbs down.
This software does not approve of your
Yeah,
positive thoughts. Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah,
the screen also is in favor of stakes and wanting to
yeah,
know things. That's funny.
yeah, yeah. For people listening, you might have noticed a trend
Thank
here in
you.
the last couple weeks of uh, conversation breaks and goes, where are these fireworks coming from?
That's a
Because
very
like,
good point. You're right.
yeah,
You're
if you
very
do like
right.
double thumbs up or anything that looks like that, it's like I realize it's a Mac thing. It's a
Oh, I
it's not even
see.
Riverside,
Okay.
because it'll happen on Zoom or Google Meet
Yes.
too. So there's some
Okay.
way you have to shut it off with Mac. With Mac, it's like the new update. They just decided everyone wants this. Let's let's
Yes,
just
I've noticed Zoom does not understand my sarcasm because
right,
sometimes I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Thumbs up." And it's not a real thumbs up, Zoom.
right,
Don't
right.
don't mock my sarcasm, Zoom. Let me
Yeah,
lean into this
yeah.
feeling.
But stakes you mentioned is that's really good, and I think what I find, is that boring questions equal boring
Mm,
answers.
mm-hmm,
So if you ask really obvious questions, you're going to get a predictable, low stakes answer.
mm-hmm,
But it really takes skill and really some creativity in coming up with, assuming it's like a documentary type style, like you're interviewing
mm-hmm,
someone, but like coming up with questions that's like gets them to think beyond what the obvious answer would be.
mm-hmm,
And and because you might just ask like, so tell me about something that you struggled with, and they'd be like, oh, I you know uh I don't know, I have dyslexia, so reading was hard, but I got through it. So it's like, okay, it's like a little bit of conflict in there, but like, what did they feel about that? Like, what did they
yes.
how did that make them anxious?
Mm-hmm,
What, yeah, what happens if they don't resolve that? What was going in their mind, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it really comes down to, yeah, those asking questions that get there, and that's not an easy
yeah.
thing to come up with, because it's like a social thing. Some people are
Mm,
just really good at giving you deep responses, and other people are just like, I'm just gonna say whatever feels like the cleanest statement here.
mm-hmm.
you know
Yes. So true. And I think for me, that's where my active listening skills have served me more than anything else, is listening for that answer where someone says, I had this, but it was fine. And to take a moment to say, wow, that probably did offer some pain points or some frustrations. Um, how was, or like digging in a little deeper, because you're so right. All of us, even when we have to introduce ourselves at an event, there's two different bios you have. There's the one that's like clean, great, I just want to give you this information and disappear. Or
Mm-hmm.
we can say a little more of the truth of like, here's a little bit more information about me. But we have to trust that that person we're speaking to is creating that place where we can divulge a little bit more. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's where the active listening, like, oh, they heard that, and oh, they're kind of interested in learning a bit more about that.
Yeah.
um and
Yeah. And that,
and
I
so
think, okay, sorry, go ahead.
you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think that like, that comes with setting expectations up
Great
front
point.
about like,
Great point.
what is this environment about? Are, you know, because
Yeah.
if people might come and be like, oh, I'm going to be in a marketing video, so I'm not going to tell them about,
Yes.
you know, some dramatic thing that happened. I broke up with my girlfriend or whatever, you know.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
maybe that's not the place to talk about your breakups, you know, in a marketing video, but like, you get what I'm saying. Like, you know, they're going to be
Yes.
like, I'm just going to tell you what the marketing team would want to hear. 5 stars, everything's great, you know.
Right. Yes. Yes.
But it takes like really setting that context to be like, here's what we're going for, and we want you to like kind of just be a little more vulnerable. We're not going to show this video to the world without you seeing it first, and you
Yes.
get the final
Correct.
say, and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point about setting expectations, creating that trust up front, creating an environment that says, if we share and it goes a little farther than you're comfortable in the moment, know that it's okay to say, I'm okay sharing this with you, but I prefer it not to be in the final product. That's
mhm.
okay, because I feel like that trust that was established in that moment continues through the rest of that conversation and
Yeah.
becomes present. Even if that specific part wasn't shown, that trust was there, that trust is felt. So I
Yeah.
think that's a very, very good point.
And if you
Yeah.
go on a reality show, that's not the case. I think they make you sign a contract that says like, you have no say in the edit. Like, we will
Correct.
paint you
Yeah.
however we want. And so you're like signing your reputation away to go on, you know, The Amazing Race. I don't know.
Yes.
Some
Well, yeah, and yeah, exactly. There's a different shift of that power dynamic, and as each individual has to be aware of what they're sharing if they're comfortable with it. But if you're in the Amazing Race, you're also running around like trying to beat the clock and these other teams. It's a lot happening that there's probably not that filter saying like, should I have said that about
Mhm.
my friend that I'm racing with? Or should I
I
have done
always
that?
it always boggles my mind when these people go in these confessionals on these reality shows and just talk completely honestly about other people,
Yes.
because it's like,
Yes.
they're gonna watch this. It's like, I don't know if it's like the producers being like, no, really tell me, you know, what a jerk this guy is, like, you know, or if it's just like, they don't think that this is real. They don't think that this is really being recorded, you know. It just boggles my mind. I'd be like, man, I wouldn't have said that even if I thought that. Like, I would be thinking, for when this is going to come out, how is this going to look?
Yes. It's sort of that like internal external conversation. Like, what do I keep internally that is like how I might really feel about a situation? But yes,
Hmm.
what do I then say externally
Yeah.
to
but
people?
but but
Yes.
like, in this kind of context, obviously, you know, we're so careful. And I mean, when I am editing, that's like that's really important to me, is like really kind of picking up on the nuances of what someone is
Hmm.
saying,
Yeah.
and what they're comfortable with. You know, we had one edit I was working on recently. Student was, or she's a graduate or something, but she worked for a big, you know, financial company. But she was kind of tiptoeing around the name of the company a little bit,
Hmm.
and it kind of became clear that she wasn't sure she was allowed to say the company's
I see.
name or something like that. So myself and the client were just like, let's steer around that. Let's not even try to,
Yeah.
put that in. It seems like she's uncomfortable, so let's not. But yeah, level of definitely trust and ethics in storytelling comes into play.
Yes.
Not just putting, you don't want to just put someone's mess out there just because it benefits the school. And I don't think any school would do that, but like, but really thinking about, uh, does this benefit me, and does this hurt
Hmm.
anybody,
Yes. Yes. I not that long ago, I interviewed someone who um, made a choice of where to go to school based on their a parent had gone to that same school, so there was a connection there. And there's a part of me that wants to like dig into that a little more. Like, what does it impact your relationship with this parent that you're? And it was clear that maybe there was some strain between that relationship, and that was not a place to dive into as much. But that this was a connection, and that is sort of where that person was willing to leave it. And I agree. I think you sense that there's a deeper story there, maybe a more compelling story, but you're right. If it doesn't serve the purpose and it doesn't serve that person to talk about, then it's best to be left where it is.
Yeah. So are there any examples from, higher ed that you think have done this kind of four-step approach well, or maybe you want to talk about something that your team has done? What do you think?
So one of my very favorite videos was done by the University of Colorado Continuing Education, maybe like 7 years ago. And it's touches on many of the things we've talked about already. It's called Catch Up, I think is what its name is on their YouTube channel. And I can provide the link as well. But it is about a student who enrolled in the University of Colorado, maybe didn't quite maybe enrolled for other people and not for himself, ended up dropping out of Colorado, and then coming back, figuring out that
Hmm.
story to come back. And it really is, I watch it and it gives me chills every time because not only is he willing to say, here's what's happening, he then says, like, the first thing I had to do was go to my new advisor and say, like, this is my story. And she says, he has this quote where he's talking to his advisor about what his past has been. And she says, you're not underwater yet, you can still float.
Hmm.
And the entire story is about how this faculty staff and this person really believed that he could have that milestone, have that success, graduate with his degree. I've never seen another video that will just blatantly say, this is the full story, that it's okay that this person dropped out. It's okay if that fit initially wasn't right for a variety of reasons. That doesn't mean his story's over. And that doesn't mean we're not going to talk about why that wasn't a good fit and why this was the better fit for
Mm-hmm.
him. It's a beautiful story. It's compelling. Instantly, in like the first 30 seconds, I'm like, I'm in. Tell me
Yeah.
more. I want to see this, like you said, sticky. I want to see this through because he's showing up in a very authentic way, in a very compelling way, being very truthful. And I want to see what happens. So even I was watching it this morning and was it, because sometimes when we think of things like, was it just impactful in the moment? But I watched it again today and I was like, man, that's it's a bold approach for
Mm-hmm.
a higher education institution. And it's says speaks volumes about the participant who is willing to be his most honest, authentic self. It speaks to the production team that also didn't shy away, and from the continuing education unit that said this is a story that many people relate to. Maybe that first brush with higher education was not a good fit for a variety of reasons. It's okay, but let's try again. Like, what if we considered this again? Um,
Hmm.
so
That's good.
that It's a beautiful story. It's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, a bit longer than I think the majority of higher education stories sometimes tend to be 30 seconds to a minute, maybe a minute and a half. So it's a longer story, but the content feels right for that timing. So it's a lovely story. It's one of the very few examples that I can think of that really sits in its truth, and it's a stronger story because it does that.
Yeah. Interesting. I'll go check that out.
Yeah.
You had me thinking, because knowing you were coming on, my wife and I are watching the show Beef. Have you seen that?
Okay. I haven't seen all of it yet.
Okay. I
But
won't tell
yes.
you, I won't spoil it for anyone. I will
Don't
just
spoil
say this is like perfect example of like problem, solution, but not so fast. Like
it. Yeah.
things start going way downhill, and like you think you know where the story is going,
Yes.
and then it just completely does a plot twist, and I think that's really interesting. Anyway, I just thought of that as an example because that's our current show that we're watching right now, and it's like it's a super good show. I really, from a story perspective, it is really good.
Yeah, and it's cleaning up into award season. So I think that
Oh yeah.
also speaks to not only the story, but the performers, directors, producers, everyone involved who is willing to be like, let's all go all in. We're
Mm-hmm.
not holding our breath here. We're not hesitating. We're going all in. And that's the sense I get from watching the episodes that I have, is that it
Mm-hmm.
feels all in. No
And it feels
hesitation.
so raw. It's like very raw,
Yes.
even in just how they handle the title sequences, like the like
Mm,
when the each new show has a title, but it's like this it's like
yeah.
this really like alarming noise that comes on, and it's like some like really ugly abstract painting in the background and like weird text. It's just like no one else is doing that, but it
Yes.
works.
It's like they know exactly their DNA, they know who they are, and they are going to lean in and not attempt to water that down to fit in. And so I agree. I think it stands out. And I also think it like captures that attention right away. You're not
Mm-hmm.
cleaning your house while you're watching that show.
Right.
You're
No.
sitting on the couch, invested in, and even sometimes I think like I need a little break. Like that episode
Yeah.
was so intense. I need to like walk around the block, take a minute,
Yeah.
which I love.
Yeah. Yeah. It got us in the first episode. My wife wanted to watch it, and I was like, that doesn't. I don't know. It looks too
Yeah.
artsy. Not into it. But I was like, I'll give it one episode, and then we're just hooked.
You're
Yeah.
in. You're in. Yes.
Yeah. Well, cool. This has been great, Sarah. Where
Yeah.
can people connect with you at? Yeah.
I am on LinkedIn. I don't know my handle. I'm a terrible marketer for myself. I think we've seen that. I don't even know. I think it's like at SAWHORTON on
Search
LinkedIn.
Sarah Whorton. Sarah
Yes.
with an H and then
Thank you.
WHORTON.
Thank you, John,
Yeah.
for being a much better marketer than I am. I ask these questions all the time to participants, but yet I'm like, I don't know, internet, search the internet for me.
I'm the
Is that
same way.
useful? Yeah, so that's an area of improvement, isn't it?
I was on a podcast at my old job, and my boss made fun of me so hard about that because we talked before the episode that I was supposed to plug this like free like PDF download that we had. But at the end of the episode, he asked me like, where can people connect with you at, John? And I'm like, I took that literally. I'm like that. I was like, I don't know. Like I'm on Facebook sometimes, I guess. Like,
You're like, I love farmers market on Saturday, so if you want to swing by, that's probably where you'll find me.
And he's like, isn't there something you wanted to promote? Like, why didn't you ask? I was like, why didn't you ask me like, oh, do you have a resource people can download?
Yes.
That would have been a more direct question. If you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you the answer.
It is, I do think sometimes, like, especially when we're doing, like, we're so focused on, like, am I getting the content? Am I responding to this? Is there things so the mind is going in a variety of different places. So sometimes I'm like, the easiest question is like, I don't know. I live in Missouri. So I guess if you're here, come by. Yes, correct.
Yeah. The hardest question for me to answer ever is just like when someone asks me what's new. I'm like, that is just a stumper every time. I can never remember what's new. I guess my I was just standing there like an idiot, and I'm like, I don't know. I've been like working and
just
like
and stuff.
Still a dad, still a husband, not divorced. Haven't gotten divorced since I last saw you.
Yes. It's those icebreaker questions, like, tell us 3 things about yourself. And it's like, I am living is one, so that's good.
I like food.
Yeah. I slept well last night, so I think, and then other people will go around and give like really profound, useful answers, and it's like, I should have gone last. I didn't know the rules here. Got it.
My favorite one to use for that is like when you tell like 2 truths and a lie.
Yes.
Or whatever I say that my stepbrother is a drag queen in San Francisco, and that's true. He's like awesome. He's got a following. He's such a cool guy. But yeah, they're like, well, that can't be true. That can't be true.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But
I also see your slight, like, you include other people in your 2 truths and a lie. So maybe that's the key, is like expanding who you truth and lie about.
Yeah, we had the best Christmas we had was when, so he used to date, this is totally off topic, but we'll just leave it in there. He used to date, because I just love telling this story. He used to date someone that was like season 5 of the RuPaul's like Drag Race or whatever. Season 5 winner or something like that. And he's got like 1 million, 2 million followers on this. Like if you know anything about the drag community, like, this person. And he came to our family Christmas, the year that, they were dating or whatever. And he was like singing show tunes, and like, it was just, it was so cool.
I bet you'll never forget that Christmas.
Never forget.
Never. Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. Anyway,
I enjoyed that story. There were stakes in there because I wanted to know how that Christmas went, and it sounds delightful.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming on. This was a fun conversation. It's great having you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and letting me talk about stories, which is just my favorite. So thank you.
Thanks for listening. 3 things I want to give you before you go. Number 1, reminder to sign up for my free weekly newsletter, all about creating content that resonates emotionally with your audience. And you can do that at unveiled.tv/newsletter. Unveiled is spelled UNVEILD. Number 2, if you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Share it with your team, your boss, your dog, whatever. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd love for you to do that. Number 3, reach out to me. If you have comments, questions, you want to talk about a video project, whatever, my email is john@unveiled.tv. John is spelled JOHN, or follow me on LinkedIn. If you're searching for me, my last name is spelled AZONI. That's all for today, and I look forward to catching you on the next episode of the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast. Thanks.